We'll wait for Ellen's cue. You take your time. We certainly took ours. Okay. Okay. So it's 7:08. We're gonna get started. I'm gonna try and multitask and take notes, and we're gonna get through it all. Great, let's stand for the pledge first. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Great. Okay, welcome back. We haven't met since November, so excited to be here to kick off the new year. We'll do a quick roll call. Sarah Byer. Here. Philip Monis. Here. Sophie Grant. Here. And Vicki Starr. Here. And our friend and former committee member Roz has moved on from Shandaken, so we send her our best and thank her for all the work that she did as the secretary of this committee, which leads me to the next item. We want to make another call for more new committee members and give a gentle nudge to our current ones that it would be great if someone wanted to step up to be the new secretary, or it could be a co-chair. I'm not attached to being the only chair, but involved in that is helping take the minutes, helping to do some administrative stuff with me in between monthly meetings, and it could be however involved you have time to do. So you don't have to jump at it right now, but in terms of like committee members, I would love to see 2 more groups, and if anyone wants to add to this, please do. 2 more groups represented on this committee. One of which I would love for some kind of employer, somebody who has a staff or a business who understands some of the challenges around workforce housing, who understands the costs and the effects. I think that would be really interesting, and we would love your voice on this committee. And I would also love to make a call, and we'll talk about these things a little bit further down in the agenda, but somebody who has an interest in helping with creating some type of home share program. I think it's been made clear that it's a smart, creative solution, and I encourage you to look up Home Share of Woodstock, which operates under the Family of Woodstock organization. And although there are neighbors, they have a little bit more density than us over there, and so they have a lot of potential things that they can be doing, and even going out to Pine Hill is too far for them. So how could we, within this committee, start getting wheels in motion for that, and then maybe like them, it becomes something that then goes off and works within some other existing organization, gets funding. It needs a dedicated person. It also requires several people on like a review committee or a review board to be vetting both home seeker candidates as well as homeowners. But the whole concept, just in a nutshell, is there are people who might have a much bigger home than what they currently need or are able to heat, or just don't want to be alone, and maybe they're older, but some people might have some health issues, some people might not have anything, they just want a roommate. So this would be a lower cost, and in some situations could be a trade. And so I guess I'm jumping down to that item now. Why not? But it could be a really advantageous option for somebody looking for housing that's affordable in our town. And we know we have a population that, I don't have the number of how many people or what percent are in what age bracket right in front of me, but we know that we have a similar makeup, let's say, as Woodstock in that sense. So we have a lot of potential, and we can get creative. Specifically, I want to call out Catskill neighbors notified me via email that there is a lovely 89-year-old woman who lives in Pine Hill. She recently had, I think, a knee or a hip procedure. She's now living on the main floor of her house, but she has 3 beautiful bedrooms on the second floor that she's not going to be using, as she is in recovery. She has... Okay, yes, we can pause.
Are the microphones working better these days? Or because
it's just like
really hear you.
Oh, I thought they were very loud.
That's good.
Yeah.
You mean when you watched a video online?
No, I mean right now.
Oh, okay.
In the space right now, yeah.
Yeah, but you're filling the whole.
I know, I'm hearing
Yeah.
myself, which I hate that. I hate that noise.
Sounds good.
Can you guys introduce yourselves and?
Yes, I'm sorry, we skipped that one.
Oh, sorry, were we?
That's okay.
No.
Well, I'm Vivian Welton, I'm on the planning board. I'm also on the comprehensive plan committee.
Oh.
And I'm also an STR owner.
Wow,
Welcome, Vivian.
okay.
Thank you.
And I'm Kerry Henderson, and I am, I'm an STR owner. We have an STR within our home, and I'm just coming here to help support local mum and pop STR home owners and just see how we can work together, because it appears like we have a lot of the same interests and perhaps ways that we can tweak the law to encourage more affordable housing.
And were you both on the STR committee when the law was being formed?
I wasn't. I was very involved.
We were both involved,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
kind of like what we're doing now.
Great,
Yeah.
Great.
But we weren't on the actual
On the
committee,
official.
but we were always there.
wonderful,
Yeah,
great.
so sometimes you can say more if you're not actually
Sure,
on the actual committee. Yeah.
yes. Okay, great. I don't want to, we're not being recorded, so.
And you also have the son that wants to do the skate park. right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the other. I'm not going to take that off because I need a haircut. But Edric's just turned 15, and he is very fired up about this idea, which he had. We didn't realize it was part of a continuing effort actually, and so we've been very involved and got mega support. We're just waiting for a date for our first fundraiser, which will be at the parish hall, hopefully. Just trying to work with them and in the next couple of months.
Now,
Awesome.
Kerry, Kevin was working on something with that years ago when he had something lined up with
Kevin raised
one of the main.
Yeah, he raised quite a bit of money. There was even a turkey trot, I believe.
Yeah.
And they got they engaged a skate park design company.
Yeah, and he was like one of the foremost designers, like in the country.
Pillar. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they designed this huge skate park that was supposed to be in Pine Hill.
Right.
I think Kevin left town, and there wasn't a lot of support at the time, apparently, from younger people. We've found now that Edric's put it out there. We've been sort of, we've been, so many young people have stepped up and want to help, and pro skaters have come out of the mountains, and donations already of skateboards and skate gear, and people so involved with skate culture, I had no idea. Yeah. Everywhere we turn, even go to the farmer's market, guy turned up and he was with one of the big teams apparently. And what was he famous for? He was famous for skating, doing handstands or something.
There's another guy in Pine Hill who used to have a really pioneer skate shop down in Brooklyn that just closed, but is that?
Yeah, I think that rings a bell because no, you didn't own the Brooklyn skate park, indoor skate park?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm getting to know Mario
Yes.
at Village East.
Yeah.
And of course, he's got his
Great
little
guy.
skate shop there, and he's friggin' awesome. He gave it. I mean, I went in there, and within 2 minutes, he loaded Edric up with skateboards. And
He's a good guy.
You talking about over in Fleischman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
great, that cafe.
We have one more minute on skate park and then we're moving
I think
on.
it's a short bridge between the snowboarders and the skateboarders.
Oh, yeah.
You know, there's
Yeah.
a lot. there's
Oh,
a
That's
lot
how they
of
can
overlap.
chase it year round.
Well,
It is true.
a number of years ago, I was out at Mount Hood. And on the base of Mount Hood is a town called Government Camp. And it's kind of like a Pine Hill on steroids. And the main drag in Pine Hill, and it's kind of like an offshoot off of the state road that comes through. And when I tell you there were 30, 40, 50 skateboarders, and they had their Toyota Tacoma, and people were getting towed up the street and skating right down the
Right
street.
down the
It was to die for. We were watching these guys going up and down, guys, girls, it didn't matter. And they were just having an absolute blast.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think that the thing is the roads around here are not so well maintained.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
That would be hard.
Hitting a pothole.
All right, friends, we're going to get into it. We have a lot we want to talk about tonight, and I'm so happy that you're here. And it wasn't on camera, but we have Carrie Henderson and Vivian Welton here. So we're going to make sure that we're definitely talking about STRs.
Yeah, we're interested in all of that.
Okay, great. But I do want to just close the loop. If you are somebody who would be open to living with a super lovely 89-year-old woman who also can use just nighttime assistance, you can have a day job, you can go wherever you want in the day, you're not, you don't have to be home 24/7. Please email shandakenhousing@gmail.com, or if you know Patricia Ruane of Catskill Neighbors, you can get in touch with her. It's of somewhat time sensitivity, and if this sounds like something that would work for you and your situation, please reach out to either shandakenhousing@gmail.com or Catskill Neighbors. And that's in Pine Hill. You get more info when you reach out. So I want to hand it over to Sarah to give us an update on what she's been doing with Ulster County Housing Action Fund.
Yeah. So as most of you probably know, the county now has a housing fund, 15 million. It's going to be allocated yearly of a lesser amount, and the idea is to keep it going so it stays alive. It's funded partially. The idea is to keep it funded. The county executive has that in mind from short-term, from rentals and tourism housing. So it's the application is going to be released probably in a month or so, I think, shortly, and the funds would be available for rentals, home ownership, emergency housing, ADUs, or infrastructure projects for AMIs up to 80%, and then that's documented for 50 years.
Can you say what AMI is for people who don't know?
Area mean income, so that so the rent cannot be more than 30% of someone's income for someone making 80% of the median.
And it's a
income.
50-year commitment now?
Yes, yeah. And all projects would need to follow the no fossil fuel and climate goals. And those are outlined in HCR's, our state's housing agency, their sustainability guidelines and design guidelines. Yeah, so I'm part of the oversight committee, and we're really excited to get applications, and we hear that there's a lot of buzz, but speaking as a committee member here, there is not a lot of people looking for this area to develop, as far as I know so far.
So that if people wanted to apply, where would they find more information?
On the county's planning website.
Okay, we can
So
put
this is
that
for
in our
individuals
minutes.
to apply for money, not for our group to apply for money.
Right, for developers, I mean,
Okay.
of any legal entity, yeah.
Gotcha, okay.
So existing landlords can apply, is this the one that they were setting up for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, existing landlords, it's renovation and new construction,
But realizing that it does come with its strings attached.
Yeah,
affordability requirements, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
Okay.
right.
Affordability with the mean income,
Now, okay,
as well as a 50-year commitment, which probably would have to get deeded into any transaction at this point.
is it for purchase as well?
Providing you
Yeah.
put a 50-year commitment to a rent
Yeah.
controlled.
Yeah, of course, there was a lot of backlash from landlords straight away. I saw like in the Freeman, you know, just how would we make money with this considering that the conditions were so stringent, but that's to be expected, right?
Well, that's only if you
Let's-
get
let's
this
hope.
house, like this
Yeah, I mean,
application.
that could be an amazing thing for this area, you know,
Well-
if someone, developer took that on, there must be a way of it being a win-win.
It has a very large potential, but Sophie and I were talking about this the other day. There's always people that have rental units here, and they're scared that they're never going to be able to collect the rent from people.
Yeah, it's.
But you know, we were trying to dispel these
I
feelings,
understand.
It's
Philip.
coming, I mean, it's what you're saying, it's coming up against
But I'm
New York
trying-
State tenant protections, which are exceptionally harsh, you know, so you have to be careful you get the right people in there. I think that's what people are worried about.
Well, and it's part of like the PR campaign that we want to help
Yeah.
with, right? Is there's a lot of horror stories that float around, and that story gets shared and distorted. And there's also amazing stories of long-term rentals right here in Shandaken
Yeah.
that I think we could play a great role in collecting and sharing, because I think that is such a huge hurdle for us, is these stereotypes around people who rent
I
being,
think
you know,
you're right. I mean,
less desirable.
Personally, we have a 5 apartment building in Woodstock, and so, you know, I'm always vetting tenants and stuff, and touch wood, you know, we have just such an amazing group. It seems like you know, it's sort of a good feeling.
It's a
So it can
symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. And then I've heard the horror stories. as well,
Of course. We'll get, there's all and everything in between, you know? And it's, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, what's our AMI? What's our AMI here, do you know? Do we know?
In the Shandaken housing snapshot.
Well, is it concentrated by the town of Shandaken, or is it Ulster County?
They break it out into Shandaken. I can find it if
And
give me
it's,
a moment.
and then, so the funds are available if you're gonna build something that will house someone who only makes up to 80% of the AMI? And then it would be 30% of their salary would be their rent?
Right.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, what a waiter at one of these restaurants around here makes, for example, if that's someone that would qualify for housing like this.
Right.
I wouldn't worry about the waiter, I'd be more worried about the cook.
Or just whoever, like, because I know
Worry
that's a
about all
big
of
part of
them.
our housing shortage is finding houses
Yeah.
for these employees.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Like,
And,
what
but we
could
know
they
they're
afford?
employed. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We need to figure out what the AMI is. We could talk to Peekamoose or Shandaken Inn or whoever and find out what these people make, but I don't know if they would qualify for the, you know.
This one has the Ulster County AMI by family size, but I'm not seeing them break it out just for Shandaken in this one.
That's
But
what
they
I-
talk about housing needs scenarios for top industries. That's on page 5 of the housing snapshot, which can be found on Ulster County Housing website, which has been linked in our previous minutes. Sorry.
That's all right.
I
I
mean,
can look it up. I don't want to.
We know nothing now is affordable, so that's what, you know, the biggest thing that the snapshot shares. But, I mean, if we could pop down to this, where is it? Oh, number 9, since we're on the topic. So, you know, in the fall or in September, we did our first housing resource meetup, and it was in an effort to like have some community outreach, but also connect with, you know, resource providers in Ulster County as well as Delaware County. Our next housing meetup is going to be sometime in late April. We're trying to find a season that is typically a little slower for businesses. And it will probably be at the Shandaken Inn, and an effort to have it be central in Shandaken. And it's going to be a meetup for business owners, with the goal to both have conversations around housing, share data about housing, and encourage collaboration and just creative brainstorming. And it's not exclusively for hospitality, it's any industry that might be here, any size business. And we'll have some facilitated conversation, but really it's meant to bring us all together around this topic and hear some stories of what are businesses doing right now, how are they being impacted, and what are solutions that they need that maybe they can't accomplish on their own. So we'll share the date next meeting, but it'll be in late April. And if anyone is interested in this topic before that, please email shandakenhousing@gmail.com, and we can either incorporate your ideas into that meetup or, any number of conversations we can have. The next event, though, that I want to make sure is on everyone's radar is March 25th. That's our monthly March meeting. Where we will have Kai Lord Farmer from Ulster County Planning here to do an information session on accessory dwelling units. And we have invited specifically, planning board, zoning board, town board, want to see at least one person from every committee, because I think it could be a really great opportunity for us to all get this great education in one fell swoop, but really maybe there's discussion that can happen thereafter. But Kai will be there. He is trying to wrangle an architect to come as well to talk about the building, the design, and that aspect of it. But they've done ADU info sessions that were really mostly designed for the public. This is totally going to be open to the public. We're going to record it and broadcast it, but rather than just go to the townspeople with all this info, we really want to make sure also that our town officials and committee members are hearing all sorts of things about it too first.
And the county planning board says that they could approve this for training credits for board members who need training credits.
Did they? Or
Yes, I
nice.
asked them.
Amazing. Well,
Thank you
there
for
we go.
sharing that.
That'll really get butts in seats. But thank you, Vivian. So yeah, March 25th, 7 p.m. right here at our monthly meeting. We'll put out a flyer about that. Joyce will help disseminate that. I didn't do our term of the month, but if anyone minds that I've been totally jumping around this agenda, I'll do it now. Just in case you haven't seen other meetings, try and bring a new term or concept. And it's not necessarily that this is the theme of today, but it's just something interesting that I learned in the last month. So, but it's just a way to kind of get more terminology out there so that as we're examining different mechanisms to increase housing stock, that we know that there's so many different options available. It's not just one thing, it's a lot of things. So scattered sites redevelopment, which you can read even more about at the Ulster County Housing Action Plan, which will be linked in the minutes, but the definition is a portfolio of small housing sites, 1 to 4 units, that are not necessarily contiguous, but are grouped as a single development in order to be eligible for tax credits, for lending purposes, for benefits from economy of scale, and for management simplicity. Properties may need minor rehabilitation or may require greater investment, such as an entire building construction. And I thought this was interesting because I think a lot of what comes up in conversation right off the bat is well, where are we going to build something? Or where, how do we increase housing if there's no land for us to build on? And I think it's just a reminder that this is one of many things that we can examine when we look at how we here in our specific town could potentially increase housing opportunities for people. And, I think the types of parcels that we have often do have multiple units on them. And I think multifamily is something, we want to examine closely and how we could make more space in our code for that. But before that process begins, we are going to work with the county to do a housing inventory to really understand what parcels do we have that are currently not actually functioning as a livable unit, and how can we convert existing structures through rehabilitation, or if they're a full necessary tear down, how does that present opportunities to then have more efficient, energy efficient housing, more cost effective utility bills, and give an opportunity for developers or property owners to be able to maximize profit, because I know we want to keep that in mind too, and that might be a great viable option for our town. So I don't know if anyone has thoughts they want to share on that, but.
No, you got to look at the efficiencies and the way things, you need common walls at this point, less footprint. We do have limited buildable space in this town, okay? It's very straightforward. 85% of the land cannot be developed, so we're left with 15%. And then we have to deal with floodplains.
But I think what we don't know right now is how much of the land that is buildable is actually functioning for housing.
And this is something that has to be looked at. Basically, we have to deal with it's not only the Shandaken Zoning and Planning Board, okay?
Yes.
The steps go a lot further than that. And we really should go out and look at Ulster County Health Department, okay? Would a certain piece of property in this town, would it be suitable? Will it pass a septic percolation test? Is there suitable water? Maybe there is a community sewer system available, which we know we have in the town of Shandaken in a couple areas. Or do you establish a community sewer area, again, to take advantage of your economy, all right?
And that speaks to density, which is something we talk about too,
Density.
which is worth examining how we are maximizing the little space we have without disrupting character or changing the feel of what it means to live here.
The disrupting of the fabric and the character of the community is integral. That's why
Yes.
it is a special place.
But my mantra, as we discussed the other day, is, the character of the town is more than just the buildings. If we don't have people here, that is severely lacking in character too. If we don't have businesses, if we don't have cultural events and attractions, if we don't have a skate park, like these things are part of what builds character. So it can't be that we're sacrificing one for the other. It's a full holistic mindset.
We have to look at not only Ulster County Plan, we have to look at New York City DEP, possibly the DEC, if there's bordering property. Are they going to allow it?
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to think what other alphabetic organization is out there.
CWC.
CWC is really just a facilitating organization.
They're just a way to get a free septic.
That's what they
Yeah,
are.
well, we might need some of those too.
Anyone can get
Well,
those.
Unless you live in Phoenicia.
CWC is basically doing they're the intermediary between the city and the local municipalities, okay, for septic systems.
Yes, okay. I think we're all familiar with the long list of letters that
Yeah.
that we get the privilege of working closely
Yes.
with. And that, and I think it's when we talk about like the idea of housing versus open space, it's, that's not necessarily our problem. So we
Yeah.
have the privilege of living in a place that is forever wild in these sections, and we need to get creative in the sections that we agree as a community are appropriate for having a little bit more housing or commercial activity or a combination of both.
Is there, but we're just understanding the term.
Correct.
Or are we talking about doing something about this?
No, I mean, this is, I think, a concept that when I came across it, I thought, this feels like something that might eventually be happening here in a greater number.
This would be an attractive way for a developer to finance a
Potentially.
project.
Mm-hmm.
Because it saves on soft costs and everything, and they can combine it into one, and it speaks to the density that we need, the gentle density, the not heavy, it's in a few places and spread out appropriately.
Yep, and the densities, the way it is set up in the town zoning right now, there are some misalignments, okay, that theoretically have to be addressed in the town zone.
So this sort of sounds like garden apartments to me,
Viv,
I
whether it
mean,
be-
that couldn't be pretty flexible, right?
It's also
Yeah.
saying like non-contiguous sites, right? Which comes to my mind. There's so many blighted properties around here, owned by, like the idea of maybe a developer being able to snatch up 4 of those or something, and
But the zoning specifically has regulations in a lot of the town right now,
right, yeah,
that has to be rechanneled.
right.
But yeah, I think it's like bringing this up is meant to have us talk about it like this and have us explore who are the people who want to come build here? What do they want to build? Does it work in the code? And if not, does the code need updating? I think we all have discussed and agreed that. But then there's also the aspect of developing long-term housing and long-term rentals as well, right? Because we also have such limited inventory that how do we make it work financially?
Well, I mean, there's existing inventory that's being used, for
Underutilized.
instance, on 214, there's a 5 apartment, old apartment building that has just got a permit for STR. I mean, that's 5
That's the one you linked to.
apartments that
Yeah.
were, intended when it was built for long-term housing. That's, and there's a couple of other apartment buildings at the moment in Shandaken that are up for sale. I'm hoping the same contingent of local hosts are not snapping them out. And so one thing, I was going to talk about it later, but one thing that could be brought up with the town is maybe, let's take pause here, even a moratorium on granting new licenses until this is sorted out, because I think it's extremely serious.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that one's been done. State law does not allow short-term rentals in, I think it's type A apartment buildings, or 3 or more, where there are 3 or more units. However, smaller population centres are allowed to make their own laws, but the state guidance is that shouldn't be. What was it? Sorry, I'm getting a bit
It
confused.
can't be less restrictive.
It can't be less restrictive, and that's what it says in the law. It sounds pretty clear. It seems like Shandaken that is being allowed, and that is less restrictive.
Yes.
But I'm sure they'll just say, well, that's guidance,
Well, we can get into STR discussion,
Yeah.
because we did put it on the agenda.
Yeah,
and-
I mean, I only brought it up because it seemed
No,
to
no,
be,
no, all these things are so related, it's really,
relating to this.
Why
it's
don't we
hard
do
to
that?
stay in
Yeah.
Why
the,
don't we do that and then go back to this, because I wanted to also address this, but it's sort of in a context.
I
of-
think, yes, I think it helps to frame a little bit.
Yeah.
But what we have been tasked to do, if people can hear me, what we've been asked to do from the town board is to review the STR law and on our committee, propose a timeline for revising that law. They didn't say revise the law to do X, Y, Z. They said, we want this new committee that didn't exist when this law was created, to examine it and take however long we discussed today we think we need to properly review it, have some discussions at our meetings, but also propose recommendations for updates to that law. Carrie mentioned this idea of a pause of issuing licenses, and this would be across the board, not just
New licenses.
new license. Yeah. Sorry, new licenses, but not just for the primary owner resident, for non-resident. It's any definition of an STR license. That's the pause that you're referring to, right?
Yeah, I mean, that would need to be
But
discussed.
well, we're in
I
the
mean,
process of license renewals, like this
Yeah.
month.
Right.
yeah.
Now,
So that's,
I mean, that
I
being
don't
said,
think.
No, I
we're
not
past
those,
that.
not
No,
those.
no.
Well, but it's also to say that if someone chooses not to renew their license, it's not a newly available
Right.
slot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to put forth to our group that we propose to the powers that be that we don't issue any more short-term licenses until we attrition down to a certain number.
Yeah.
And I believe someone
there was a
quoted-
10% number initially.
We have 11% now.
But I thought someone told me what the,
150
It's
for
150.
non-residents.
Yeah, and it's unlimited
for residents.
For residents. The problem being, we see, is that the proof of being a resident is not enough. It's really hard to determine who is actually a resident. You can say
no, but what I was gonna say is, someone mentioned in one of these meetings a percentage number that was recommended
That's
for
one
the
to-
population.
It was 10%.
The county recommends, or in the action item of making an STR law, which is part of the Housing Smart Communities,
Right.
list of action items. In order to get points, let's say in that system, one of the biggest components is, does your STR law limit the number of STRs to 1 or 2%? And that's like the county,
of the overall housing stock, right?
correct.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
The only thing is
what would
it's
that
very
be?
far from 11%.
30 homes.
So, but I mean, here's the other thing that we need to discuss and decide as a community is like, that percent might not be appropriate for a place like ours if we're
For tourism.
a heavy tourist-based industry and economy. So I'm not saying we have to get to 1% by the end of 2024 or anything of that nature, but we do need to come up with goals of what we think an appropriate percentage would be, but also how we can go about reasonably regulating the aspect of the owner occupied, because there are some towns that say, and I want to say one of them is Olive, you can have an STR on your primary residence property, and then you can have one other one in town, and that's it. So that's just an example of what a neighboring town that might have a similar makeup to
It sort of
us.
seems reasonable. I think when the law was drafted, no one, well, we were there every meeting, no one could have imagined that someone would turn up and become a resident of the town and then suddenly have 17 STRs in town. Maybe not all owned by that person, but there's definitely a consortium at work here. This is the investor play.
Well-
As opposed to, we were more thinking of, it's the mum and pops like us
Yeah.
who do the.
And
now-
for those of us who weren't at those meetings,
Yeah.
and part of that conversation
Yeah.
specifically, what was your thought in that time? You just didn't imagine that existed, or was there something that you thought, because there is no
I
mention?
certainly couldn't have foreseen that the pandemic would happen. You would have like a huge influx of people coming, buying property at extreme high prices, then the pandemic going away, going back to Brooklyn, and they all come online.
But
No
that's
one could-
different from what you were mentioning before. There are entire businesses
Oh, yeah.
that just buy property and turn them into
No,
SO.
they were always
short-term
here.
rentals.
They were always here. I personally didn't see it happening around me, but now it seems like it's everywhere. I have friends in Pine Hill who have a lovely home, and next door there's an STR, and the cleaning crew, apparently the company owns something like 50 STRs, not here, but
In
I
various
think they own
towns.
2 or 3 in Shandaken, and the cleaning crew's coming up from New York
They're
City.
real estate
And they're having
businesses.
arguments outside their house, being shouted at by their foreman, and then they go back. They have no interest in this community other than to extract money.
So what do we think we should propose? Because they want us to make the.
Well, and it's,
Yeah.
just to
Make it-
clarify, there's no moratorium or pause on issuing new licenses until there's a clear outline from us on what our review process would look like generally. I don't think it's that we need to know every single step today,
What do you
but
mean, what do you mean review process?
So-
We're not just gonna say.
we're
"Here are
not just
3
gonna
things we would
decide
like you to
today, we're not, yeah, we need to go look at the law as a group, like, really thoroughly.
do," Which we just did in the last 3 weeks,
Yeah.
right,
Yes, we
guys?
did.
Okay, so next. Check.
But there might need to be some more community input that is more publicly, overtly shared that we are doing this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because there was such a multi-year long process that we need to honor, and also we need to take the new lens that we're looking at this from housing specifically, and long-term housing and housing availability, and also like future visioning that we're doing with the comp plan committee. And so it's not a one night, one meeting, one conversation. It's something that, we need to outline for the town board, like, this is how we plan to thoroughly look at this with the community. And then we're gonna make recommendations that are based on that, but also based on what, what the Housing Smart Communities Initiative is based on too.
And what's our deadline for making those recommendations?
We can decide what that,
What would your thought be as far as, because I'm drawing a blank, that there are, I believe, several apartment buildings being sold at the moment in Shandaken, and I don't know, we don't know whether they're actually being eyed as potential short-term rentals or not, but I think there's probably a good possibility they
it wouldn't be
are.
impossible.
That by the time any moratoriums announced or anything like that, they could very easily have licenses because there's nothing.
Well, it is
about
in the
that.
law that they have to wait a minimum of a year
A year,
before they
they
can
have to wait.
apply,
That's true.
right? So
Well,
I think we're definitely not
I
gonna
forgot
take.
about that
Yes,
aspect,
but we're not gonna take a year.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, if we wanna examine, like,
Yeah.
and again, the timeline that we can draft, we can do that together today. We can say, next month, we're gonna, invite people to come talk about this. The month after that, we're gonna propose, it could be 3 or 4 months at most, and then we say it, at the June board meeting, we wanna share the recommended revisions, or it's something like that.
So, can I make a proposal? Because you guys, they're reviewing the licenses now?
Now, the new
No, the renewals.
Renewals?
No, the renewals. That's
And
that's
we're already-
basically a
we're
done
already-
deal.
Yeah.
Once you write your check and send it in, they'll send out a license.
Right,
Yeah.
however, we're already at the max, right?
Yes.
So, why don't we do what you said? Why don't we say, by the way, I'm not gonna be here for the next meeting, I'm gonna be
Okay.
out of town, but I like that timeline of, let's pick a date in the next month or two to have an open forum, and then let's make our proposal. Because here's the other thing I'm thinking. If the renewals happen every January, and what's been happening for the last 12 months is all the real estate agents who are selling properties here are telling people who are buying them, you have to hold it a year before you can get an Airbnb license. So it would be good if we start to get the word out now so that the real estate community learns now that next year that might not be true anymore, and people who are buying houses in the next 12 months may not get a short-term rental license at all.
Well,
Yeah.
that is a potential problem,
What's the potential problem?
because you are gonna see a lot of people like that, and there are a lot of people that fall into that category.
No, I'm saying if they know now that they buy a house, knowing that they might not get a short-term rental
Well,
license ever.
Well, and the other thing we need to be very
It goes onto
careful
a waiting
of.
list, like in Town of Olive. You're on a waiting list,
Yeah.
okay?
Right, either way, there could be that, but the thing we want to be mindful of is like, we can't be perceived, or we can't actually be, the moratorium would be, like I said, both owner occupied and non-resident, or I'm sorry if I'm like, keep mangling the phrase, but, so it's, eventually, any revisions are not only affecting one or the, one group or the other.
Could affect all of us.
Right.
Could affect, yeah.
So we
No,
just want
that
to
I
make sure
get.
we're being fair and like looking at it as the whole law and, yeah.
I just feel like,
But I really like your idea of, because a lot of what we're meant to do here is community outreach. So there is this aspect of saying, we're looking at this and we're examining it because it's not strict enough in its regulations, and we have not managed to really bring down this number of STR, percentage. So the other question I would love to ask about when the law was made is that there is no definition of the number of units that can be under a single license, right? So the property that you referred to earlier on 214
Yeah, it's one license.
is a single license.
Yeah, we are- I think-
That's confusing to me.
Yeah, someone in our group asked the town specifically that, and yeah.
Did that so that came up, or?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, so that wasn't put into the law.
Right.
So we would recommend that it would be.
right.
I wonder what the county recommends when they say 1 to 2% of housing stock.
Well,
Probably means number of units.
we are also in a unique
Right.
situation here as well, because we really don't have other lodging within the town. It's very limited, okay? You have the Emerson, you have the Starlight, you have up in the beginning in Alvaria Valley, there's a couple of places. But other than that, we're limited, okay? And that does affect the tourism in the area.
Well, I don't think we're limited anymore because the short-term rental owners are across the board seeing a dramatic decrease in bookings.
Yes, they are.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and prices have come
I'm
down.
There's a
Price inflation.
massive oversupply in the market at the moment, which has really happened. We've noticed like the last 6 months, particularly.
That's correct.
And there's a massive undersupply of long-term housing.
Which theoretically, and I don't necessarily believe in the supply and demand curves all the time in this particular situation, but theoretically, there should be some overflow. I mean, I have a home that's eligible for short-term rental.
Yeah,
Okay, and it's on long-term rental.
yeah.
Okay. I'm very straightforward with it.
Are you having a good experience?
I do have a very good experience
I love
with
to
it.
hear that.
Thank you.
No, I'm really happy to hear that. But I did send an email to our committee, and in the interest of giving some structure to our timeline discussion, it's like the definitions of the various types of STRs. That was stuff that we were going to closely examine. The code enforcement procedures and how units or license applicants, like, how is that all going? Are people getting inspected? What is the process been like? How has it been for our town employees? Has it been sustainable for them? Have they been managing to properly enforce the code? What happens when something doesn't meet the standards? It is not our town's job to issue anybody the license just because they took the time to fill out the application. We need to make sure we're following procedure. Waitlist procedures, and this speaks to the moratorium or the pause. What properties are eligible to become STRs? So currently there are no protections for converting multifamily dwellings to STRs. And this is the unit you were talking about. This is the idea of the potential that long-term housing.
And the definition of multi-dwelling too.
And multi-dwelling doesn't even show up in the STR law. So I think that is like
Yeah.
a critical.
And I think there was discussion of it, but many of us would have been thrown out right from the beginning if I think they're going to put like no SCRs and multifamilies, but what is strictly a multifamily? The state law is very clear. So multi-dwelling is a building with 3 or more units in it.
Isn't it a real clear, like your what do you call it, the license you get for your house, like
Certificate of occupancy.
Yeah, the certificate of occupancy states very clearly, doesn't it? How many?
It does, but you gotta understand, in this community here, we some of these homes have pre-existed before there were any codes in the town. Okay?
But when they pass, if it sells, don't you have to then
No,
get a certificate of occupancy?
It's already pre-existing.
Oh, Jesus, okay.
So this is one of these,
It may be interesting to look at Woodstock's law. They have a nifty sort of a chart.
Hunter Tannersville too.
Right. Yeah. I know Woodstock have a chart which makes it very clear. Well, it made it very clear that we couldn't do short-term rentals in our building just through that chart.
Well, and for healthy.
Not that was the intention.
Right,
Yeah.
yes. For healthy debate and, if something like that were to happen, how, as an STR owner and an LTR owner,
Right.
and considering how the market has shifted, have you considered converting your STRs to LTRs?
No, because in our situation, really, there's an extra room in our house, which that wouldn't work. And our little cottage is not suitable for long-term rentals. It doesn't even have a kitchen.
Yeah.
But it's on our, property. I think it's very different from a building that was specifically built as an apartment building, or with kitchens. This is for people to live. And I think that's.
So that speaks to some of the definitions that we
Yeah.
can review
and
and
I don't think, particularly with owner occupied, and there was a lot of discussion about this. You're a very dicey ground if you were to demand that your spaces on your property be long-term rentals. It's a very different living dynamic.
Yeah.
And there was
No,
a
I
lot
hear
of
that.
there was a lot of discussion about that.
Sure.
Do you limit one STR to a single property?
That was discussed a lot too, and that didn't work. That didn't really work for us either, because there are a lot of people, people who had, like us, we have a room and we have a little cottage out the back.
But that's under one license, right?
That's under.
So you
one
have
license.
2 STRs on one property?
But under the law, that's one license.
That's one license. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because,
That's where it's askew.
It's a what?
That's where it is askew.
I think there's another thing that can be discussed, which is a bedroom in someone's home where you're using the same entrance, the same
Well,
bath.
it's not the same entrance.
Okay.
But it's basically it's a third level, but it's not. It doesn't have kitchen.
So it's an
or
apartment.
anything.
No kitchen.
No kitchen. It's one. And
So your property is a single family, your zoning is single
Yeah.
family
Yeah.
still.
And then you essentially have an ADU in the back, which you're renting on a short-term basis.
yeah.
of sorts. I don't, and I say ADU, but maybe ADUs have a definition that
No, I think
is
it's a
specific
different
with
sort
the
of
kitchen and,
definition, you
yeah.
know, it's a studio.
Mm-hmm. Which is very common here.
Yeah, and it's very common, I think for that reason, they didn't think, you know, that you should have separate licenses, separate spaces, because so many were like that. But then, you know, where does it come when you've got, you know, a specific, the owner's not living there, 5 unit apartment building.
Right, so now you have 5 STRs
Yeah, but with no owner.
with 1 license.
But no one lives
With
on the
one license,
property
yeah.
full-time.
1 license, 5 STRs.
Yeah, and no one's on the property, like the owner's not living there.
Right, that's truly a investment property.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
it's like
it
a
was-
motel.
But even if the owner was living there,
Yeah.
it would still, I think it would still be excessive, and there's no regulation prohibiting it, because there's no cutoff number.
You know, I think it was this distinction between, you know, and it's sort of really difficult because everyone's situation. So between, you know, mum and pop, we're, you know, sort of like you're a mum and
Yeah.
pop. You know, we make a little extra money that helps us pay our taxes and live here and contribute to the community. And investor, even if they are living in Shandaken, you know, I think that was always, no one could
intent.
ever quite work out how do you, you know, how do
Right.
you differentiate?
Well, and
Yeah, I would
apparently,
say-
I was just gonna jump in one,
Not that there's anything wrong with investor per se either. But
No, but there's 2 things I want to note. Someone let me know recently that, because part of the challenge is like, well, you know, there could be however many different LLCs, and that's typically hard to figure out who owns that. I think they recently passed a law in New York State that that there is transparency on that for law and code enforcement.
It's under review right now. It is,
So that's, you know, that is.
you could find out who's behind the
Exactly.
LLC.
And as a code enforcement officer, and that speaks to like what recommendations, you know, could be in the STR law of like, you know, it has to be determined, you know, who owns it, because that's important to the community and it's important to the law. But if we can't figure out that information, it becomes this thing where, well, we can't figure it out, so how we can't control it, we can't regulate it.
Yeah, it's really hard, and we had a lot of talk about that. Oh, well, let's just say LLCs can't get an STR license. Well, any attorney would, I'm not an LLC, but if I went to my attorney, I know he would recommend, put your, you know, STRs in LLC, because if someone falls over, you know, it's harder for them to, you know, get at you personally.
But there are sole proprietor LLCs, which are easy to figure out who the owner is.
Yeah.
And then there are
Right,
other
there-
types of LLCs. So, I mean, I do feel like there's a lot
That's an
of,
interesting angle. I mean, do you think that the law could distinguish between the two?
yes, they can.
So that's a good.
that
Yeah, because
would
it's
be
like a
good way to-
classification.
Yeah.
Yeah, because LLC is not a tax designation, it's a liability, it's to limit your liability. It's just I mean, you can have an LLC without even having a business bank account, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
Like, you don't do special taxes or anything like
It's
that.
real easy.
It's just you.
Yeah.
It's just you, you
The
know?
ownership, yeah.
Yeah, but I do think that there's a distinction there. I also think that for new people coming in, even your scenario would be maybe something we would no longer want to allow. Obviously, it
Yeah.
makes sense for you.
Yeah.
You're here already, and
And
you're...
we've done it before, Airbnb.
But if someone
you
is
know.
coming in new and buying a piece of property with the eye on the property being like, oh, I could do that for an STRO, and I could turn that building in, and I could convert this little thing into
No,
that,
I think
then we
those-
just say, no, you can't.
I think those days are drawing to
Coming
a
to an end.
close.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when we pass the property on, if we ever do, it's not a given that, you know, because there's no like grandfathering in with the law, right?
We
Right.
wanted, I mean, there are some towns that put in a grandfathering provision,
Yeah.
which removes a lot of these issues of not wanting to put people out of business who are, you know, genuinely mom and pop owners. And if they're grandfathered in, then you can put restrictions on new licenses that are different. Our town board at that time didn't really like the idea of grandfathering. So that's why it wasn't seriously considered. But I still think that it's worth taking another look at,
I do too.
especially since everything's kind of multiplied so fast with the new licenses.
Yeah, I mean, clearly we have too many Airbnbs,
Yeah.
you know?
I don't know where the number 150 came
It was how
from.
many there were.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
how
these
many,
were-
it was how many non-resident STRs there were, like,
That was
that's,
the estimate. It turned out to be fairly accurate.
The initial plan was to have 300 STRs within the town of Shandaken. Okay? And, I mean, I was part of the audience here. And it was stated at that point, okay, we'll do 150 residents and 150 non-residents. And somebody in the audience stated, well, that's really not right. And somebody on the town board at that point stated, all right, we can do unlimited for the residents and cap the non-residents at 150.
Right.
Was it fair?
Wait, so that's how it is now?
That is how it is now.
So there's a
how it
lot
sta-
more
how
than
it-
150.
How it's-
there's 150.
No, there's 150, they reached the cap, and I believe.
There's like a
something like
handful
50
more.
There's only like something like 50 or something actual residents, who-
Right, but-
or resident licenses. I
Resident
guess.
licenses, but then we've got all these LLCs.
But we've got
popping
these people who've got 17, 20 properties, so how many are there in actuality?
Right.
Everybody should just have a license.
They all have licenses, it's just that if you have if you have 5 on one property, you only need one
But the-
license.
No, but
Well-
I'm confused by there's 150, but then there's all these others?
No, there's 150 of the non-resident.
Right.
And then there's almost the same, I thought there was the same
No, 50
amount.
I think there's about 50 on that list I saw.
I think originally there may have been 70 or 75 residents, but it might have gone, I don't know what happened since.
And I might have counted it wrong too, so,
But I do think the 11% to me represents something in the 300 range.
That's
Of
correct.
total licenses.
right.
Total.
yeah.
So,
Well, if Joyce was here, she could tell us.
But
She'd know
also,
exactly what
I mean,
it was today.
we can get that information very easily, but it's
Yeah.
it speaks to the questions of enforcement, which the county has. We could sign on to a plan through county funding and discounts and whatnot for their web-based system that is able to, like, in a second, like, scan every single STR website and determine what listings there are, and then you corroborate that with
Now,
what licenses you have. And I think that would be telling in terms of understanding better the number of units we're talking about on each license. Because maybe it's only a handful that, maybe it's an inflated problem in our heads, but, the fact of the matter is we know it's happening, but it's like, to what extent do we need to control for it?
Yeah.
Because I think if it has a separate listing online, it is a separate license. And I think if the burden to get a license was you have to pay for each license per unit, per actual
I don't
listing.
think, that could be a slight disincentive, but I think how much can you charge for a license, and then it's like you have 5 or 6 units on one
well,
property.
but this is part of the problem.
Or you have to say, or there's some aspect in the code as well that could eventually come about that, stipulates that if there are STR licenses.
Licensing also has to be proportionate to the amount of money that the town is spending on enforcement and all of that. There's state guidance, and that I brought this up all the way through, but no one listened. But there is a balancing act here.
It's for services rendered, there should be a fee, okay?
Yeah.
And there is no direct allocation on these things.
No, it's not, guys, just don't get so excited about these new sidewalks. It's like, it should remotely be related to what the operation is here. I think that's what the state says, or the state guidance is. Of course, there's no law to enforce that or
Right.
or
Question-
anything. But there's say for local hosts, it's already a burden. The license fees. The license fees are higher than just about any municipality, every municipality, locally and almost everywhere. It was almost like I could say
In the country.
a little outrageous.
And it's based on how many bedrooms, correct?
Well, there's a flat
Somewhat.
fee, and
Like
then
It's cheaper, like if you live on the property, like
Right.
we do. It's a lot cheaper than if you
How
are.
much is the license?
it varies.
ranges.
It varies.
It
Because
depends,
Like
like,
it's
from
a
what to
flat,
what?
it's a flat fee, and then there's a bedroom charge.
Okay.
Okay, which might be $100 a bedroom,
I think it's something
or
like that.
or
Can
150.
you remember? It depends, and it
It's in
depends
law.
on whether you're a resident and
It's a
you
whole
have a separate
matrix.
place, or whether you're. The most expensive is if you're from outside and you own property here. You can be paying $1,000 quite easily,
Or
Per
more.
year,
or more.
per year.
for a license?
Yeah, yeah.
Question, do we have, so, first time around, the residents said it's not fair if we have such a cap, so the residents all got to keep their short-term rentals, and then we added 150 new ones, is that the general
It's like,
story?
there's 153 non-residents, I last heard.
We
Okay.
haven't added, I mean, there
They
was,
added 3 extras
Yeah.
for extenuating circumstances. Somebody missed a cutoff because they were on vacation. Something like that. I don't,
No, I don't care about the exact number, I'm trying to understand the concept. So the concept was everybody who already lived here, who already had them, wasn't gonna be punished, they got to keep
No,
theirs.
that was never
one-
stated. We all had to go through the licensing process and be inspected.
But I'm just saying, that was the conversation, is that the gist
Well,
that I'm
about the
understanding?
cap, since it was estimated
Yeah.
that 150 non-resident owners already existed, we didn't really have a count of the resident owners,
that's,
and so we didn't know, but if the cap was
We
going
thought
to
it was
be-
about 30 or something, which was probably about accurate.
I don't remember
Yeah.
ever hearing a definite number
Yeah.
for the resident owners.
So
But
where I'm going with this
But
is, go ahead.
what he was saying is that if we were going to set the cap at 150, because it was the idea of not putting people that are existing out of business, then it wouldn't be fair to have a lower cap for residents just because there were fewer of them. So that's how that number came about.
Right, okay, but,
That's how the no cap on residents came about.
so where
Yeah,
I'm
I
going
think-
with this now, though, is that moving forward, if we, I'm just using this as an example, if we propose that, okay, we're freezing issuing licenses until we attrition down to a certain number, that will not affect anybody who's already here running short-term
No.
rentals. It will only affect new buyers
we-
who
we-
come into the community,
We
right?
very
Right.
much support that, and that's the
Yes.
idea we were
So I don't
putting
see any
forward.
downside to
So,
that.
I was saying, I don't know what that number is, and I think, maybe the percentage thing is a good idea, but, maybe, say for instance, it goes down to 75 from 150, by attrition. I mean, it might take 10, 15
It
years
might.
to get there, but it's gonna mean people are not gonna be buying properties on the basis of, at the moment, it's pretty easy. I think there's only a couple of people on the waiting list, and it seems like it moves through pretty quick.
But
yeah,
they'll,
there's
but
only
they're,
like 2 or 3 on the wait list.
does
Yeah.
does it feel from what's happened in the last couple of years around this conversation that nobody would disagree with that? That if we could just say, we're not issuing any more new licenses now for a while.
Yeah.
We want to get down to 100 instead of 300 or
I think it's an
whatever it
amazing
is.
thing, I think it's amazing that we're having this discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels really, it sort of feels really good after, just because you're an STR only you're the bogeyman, that's what it was like for,
When the
you know,
law was being discussed.
But, we
it
have
was-
common
yeah.
interests. I mean, the law, it says at the start of the law that, part of this is to support locals wanting to needing to earn some extra money. That is
also
part of that's part of the stated purpose of the law.
Right, but I also think it's just, I'm sure it was a shock to everybody to get used to this concept of like, this is gonna be regulated. But now that it is
Oh.
regulated, I'm guessing it'll be a little bit easier to just sharpen the teeth on this thing.
Totally,
Yeah.
and I mean, Peter was saying that as the law was passed, that look, this is not set in stone.
Right.
In a 6 months, a year,
Right.
you know, we can look at this and hone it in, and that's just right. Nobody could have foreseen, no one had a crystal ball
Yeah.
and would foresee exactly what was happening. We needed some time to see, you know, how this is working. I think there's a general consensus among all of us that there are just too many in the space, and that's hurting us all. It's hurting the availability of housing. It's hurting the ability
makes
of,
all housing
of local
more-
hosts to.
Clearly.
It makes
there's-
all housing more expensive, basically.
Not only that, but
Totally.
it's not even an opinion. It's, if we have empty Airbnbs sitting around that
Yeah.
the owners cannot rent them, and we have people who can't find housing,
Yeah.
it's 100% a fact that we have too many short-term
But if we-
rentals.
Well, and it's also already like the nature of, like, long before STR was so much of a thing, this was a high percentage of vacation second homes,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, again, part of the character of the town
It
that
is.
that
It always-
exists,
and
right?
We always talked about that historical
Right.
backdrop, but it's sort of.
But now it's
but the
also
way
people's
that-
third home and fourth home because we know that the wealth gap is enormous. And so, you know, it's not just this, you know, romantic, oh, I have a little bungalow and we go there with our family for the
you know,
summer.
our fear if something's not happened, if something doesn't happen, you know, I think a lot of these investors have deep pockets. They can afford to wait it out while others fall out of the space. And
Well, and
new
to that,
people- New people just can go look elsewhere.
yeah,
but to that point, you know, like you said, we don't want STR owners as a monolith to be the boogeyman.
yeah,
I also think,
Fee structure.
you know, I want to be of the mindset in a similar way that if people are coming here, revitalizing, rehabilitating, and, you know, breathing life back into properties that really were hopeless in a lot of ways, I want to bring those people into this conversation too, because if they're willing to invest, how can we help make math work so that they can develop the things that we need them to, right? Because everyone's always just trying to recognize, you know, the places in the market where they can make money.
yeah.
So
I think that's really really smart, and to extend the olive branch, if you like.
yeah, because it's, I'm grateful that if anybody
They
wants
have the tools.
to,
They have the money and the tools.
and if they
to do
have
it.
the funds, yeah, then I think there's like this conversation that we want to continue having to say, we're so happy people want to come and redevelop parcels here that were maybe, you know, left in the dust. But we don't need that type of thing. We need this.
Right, yeah.
We can't tell them what to do with their property per se, but we can create conditions, and that's what this committee is for, to encourage, you know,
Well,
housing
we-
that's
you know, we're here,
affordable.
we can't do this now, but, you know, maybe we can make this work.
Well, and
So
there's
it's a
ideas that are out there about tax credits and about incentives
It's
to,
very exciting.
Yeah.
I'm excited. you know.
I think it could be really great, and I think, I want to make sure, because it's 8:20, I want to make sure.
I gotta be home, Coco's on at 9.
Okay, so I want to talk 5 more minutes, just timeline and just, you know, like, again, looking at the scope of work and how there's a lot that is involved, but I think this was not meant to be the repeat of the STR committee process. This is our process that we're going to define and try and, you know, infuse with as much thoughtfulness and, you know, legitimacy as we can without it taking 3 years. So, you know, I do think if we can have a timeline that ends with a June delivery of recommendations to the town board, it's before the summer. This is not, we're delivering this timeline in June, we're delivering the timeline at the next board meeting.
Sophie,
Yeah.
it's my understanding that the town board is having a workshop next Monday to discuss STRs.
If they are, I'm not aware of it.
That's,
That's what I wrote in my
I
calendar.
heard something to that extent. I wasn't sure if it was a workshop meeting or not.
I mean, we
At
have
the,
to
before the town
confirm
board,
that.
before the regular meeting?
Next Monday, yeah.
Is it the
That's-
fifth
that's
Monday or
last-
that's the first Monday?
That's the last Monday.
That's
of
the fifth
January.
Monday. So there was a bonus one and they put something in there?
That's what the plan was, that we were gonna discuss it tonight, and then we were gonna make some suggestions or recommendations, and then they would discuss them next Monday at the workshop, which I imagine that we would be invited to.
I would hope
To
so,
go
but
to, you know.
yeah, if that came up, I was not notified or aware of it, but we could definitely make the time to go and bring, parts of this conversation, but it wasn't my understanding that there was this whole other workshop. That was what I was under the impression that it was
I
like,
don't see that on the Shandaken website. I do see for next Monday, town board workshop meeting for town business.
Well,
Yeah, they
that's
don't-
a general statement, so they could
Is
certainly
that's,
take up the
Monday the
STR
29th.
issue as business.
Okay, so Monday, January 29th, there's some sort of workshop. It might be for things including STRs. And we'll attend that.
Well, I know they wanted to hear from this
I hope
this
so.
group, but then,
No,
Yeah.
it
whatever.
sounded
I mean,
like-
I think we
got
have
to-
our buckets
yeah.
of what we know we're looking at, and we know the lens through which we're looking at it. So I don't think it's going to be hard for us to produce a
I
timeline.
wrote it down.
She wrote it down.
Reduce maximum STR licenses. Decide how many units can be on one license. And do we want to prevent or have some rules around multifamily buildings being used for STRs? Those are the three things that I have.
Yes, and then if this is a Google Doc, then I could jump in there later, but
I can add.
the code enforcement procedures need to be detailed, and we need to add things
Well,
to
the
that.
code- The code enforcement details are in the STR regs. Okay, 3-year inspections, the smoke detectors and fire alarms operational.
But who's doing that?
Oh, they have they contract building inspector.
The building
Qualified
inspector does it,
inspector.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all like
And who oversees that?
That would be the building department.
building department.
Okay.
So all of that is.
I'm not taking
Well, is
anything
that
at
fall
face
under-
value. Like,
Yeah.
I
Does that
want to
fall under
assume that we need
Grace,
help
yeah.
with this because I think it's it's bigger and it's more time consuming.
Yeah.
And I don't know, how do we know that every single property has been inspected?
Well, that was part of the licensing procedure.
So you,
Which is what I'm trying to say. I want clarity and
You wouldn't get
transparency
I mean, you
on.
wouldn't get a license. You can't get a license unless you're inspected.
I'm not sure that that is always the case in Shandaken.
No, that is the case.
But being inspected for
No.
like building codes is different from being inspected to see how many Airbnbs you can run in this space.
Well, that's a good point.
I just
Right,
would
but
like,
That could happen, that
At the
could
same
change
time.
after the license is issued.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if there's any process to check
To follow
in
up on
on
it.
that.
and when you have your
Yeah.
renewal, right, that involves no additional inspection,
No, but
right?
every 3 years.
Right.
I think that's pretty standard with because it's very expensive to do that, and so it's.
Well, to Phil's point about how many things we have to be in compliance with here, I want to better understand how we are staying in compliance.
Yeah.
Ulster County wants to understand that if we're to pursue points on the
There's-
SCR
I mean,
law.
There's a lot of
So-
points. I mean, I could send you a whole list of
Perfect.
of-
I just
of-
want-
of sort of
for me,
little
compliance-
things we've
Yes,
thought of.
for me,
Yeah.
compliance needs to be in our timeline of review.
I mean, for instance, for instance, we're supposed to put our license number on every listing we have up, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't. It doesn't appear like in the law there's any penalty for that. Kingston have $10,000 penalty if you don't.
Right.
Are you going to list? Are you going to not list your license number if there's a $10,000 penalty?
Right.
That's sort of one way of ensuring that everyone has licenses. It's
Yeah, I think with any law, we have to
Yeah.
understand how it's enforced, what the
Yeah.
capacity for town is to enforce it, and just feel good that we know it's being enforced properly. And I
Yeah.
think that is all I'm suggesting.
We've seen sort of like what appears to be like trailers up there, as beautiful trailers.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that the STR
That-
law, for instance, addresses
doesn't.
residences on wheels,
Mm-hmm.
for instance. So there, you know, you could, but
Actually, I think it does.
it does?
I think it does.
Yeah, I mean,
So, put it in.
I think it does.
Okay.
We
So,
need to find all
yeah,
those questions
I should look at
are-
that.
So speaking of penalties, I think that might be something to revisit, whether we do want, like Carrie said, penalties for non-compliance with existing rules in the law, which nobody seems to be enforcing.
Residency standards too, it doesn't seem like, I don't know whether anyone's worked this out though, you know, how can you actually?
The residency, reg, you have to submit your driver's license and
Yeah.
your mail.
My driver's license is Woodstock, you know, it's like,
Well,
I live in Shandaken, you know,
consider yourself lucky then, I guess.
yeah.
But there is a residency requirement, and there are certain documents that have to be provided with your license, your SDR license.
Yeah, I know, it's just a question is,
I gotta
are they,
tell
are
you,
they, are they stringent enough?
that is so
Are there
easy to
people,
fake.
Are there people,
Yeah.
So easy.
are
It
there
is.
people lying?
I've changed the address on my driver's license 3 times in the last year,
Yeah. It's
based
easy
on
to
what
do.
I need in my
What
license
do you have to
for
hide,
that day.
Vicky?
No, but
Okay, so I did add defining and adding more clarity to variety of multiple dwellings. So, you know, understanding the complexity to how that could exist in real life, that maybe it does suggest that there's some definitions that could be enhanced to, you know, make it really clear like what type of unit it is. And, you know, so anyway, just adding that in.
Can I propose, you're talking about a process for us to get recommendations by June. Can we kind of list like the big processes? We're talking about like having a, yeah.
Yes,
And-
like some kind of open feedback session.
Yeah.
Yeah,
open to the public, to the general public, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
Should we do
Which
that
I'm
in
not ready,
April?
we're not ready for next month and you're not here and,
Should we do it April? Because we have March as our ADU.
right, thank you. Yeah. Okay, and then that gives us time to do even more preparations and get even more data points, get potentially this like, you know, these compliance tools from the county to see how effective those are and how people here can use them in their jobs. Okay, so I'm sorry, going back to what you said. So if there's public feedback in April, is that from existing law or are they responding to something that we're putting out there and giving feedback on that?
Well, wouldn't this be in conjunction with the town board? Because if they
I
actually
guess
come up
so.
with a draft of a new STR law,
Yeah.
then they were gonna have a hearing about that anyway.
Right.
Yeah, I
So
think
maybe
clearly
could
we
figure
need
that
to
out on
like
Monday,
figure out what they
next
got going
Monday.
on because yeah, I don't want to
Yeah.
design a whole program and then like,
Carrie, the licensing procedure right
Thank you,
now,
Vivian.
okay, the law was approved on June 9th, 2022. Okay, didn't go into effect until September
Right.
of 2022.
Yeah.
So the new licenses theoretically will go into effect September of 2024 now.
They don't all, it depends on what date, the date you're inspected, maybe, is it?
I don't know, I just got
Yeah.
my renewal.
I just
notice,
renewed
and I
mine,
was
for
one of
instance,
the-
it's like
yeah.
rolling.
Yeah,
I
I
was
don't
one
know.
of the last licenses to be issued.
Yeah, in January, yeah.
I think mine is up, mine expires in February.
Oh,
So
okay.
I
Yeah,
just
mine
got
was
my
in
renewal
January,
notice.
I think, yeah.
And they have been Joyce said they have been sending them out.
This was the thing,
all
Peter,
month
Peter
to
was wanting to
people.
wait to see, before we talked about attrition and all that, oh, well, how many would renew, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the town board's waiting for that
Yeah.
number. But that'll be, I guess if mine
Soon, right?
is expired in February, then that's gonna be over
So
with
that's-
fairly
yeah.
soon.
Yeah,
Can I ask, we're really talking about homeowners here, residents who live here, a moratorium on STRs for them too, right now, for 6 months?
on new
On
licenses.
new
Yeah.
licenses.
Yes.
And I'm not familiar with how burdensome that would be, really, but is
I don't
that-
think there's
There's
is there
no
a waiting
burden.
list?
There's-
I mean, if
yeah.
there's no waiting list, because there's no cap.
Well, the waiting
for
list
the-
is,
For the
all-
residents.
right, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a long waiting list at all for the non-residents.
Right.
Then whoever has intentions of starting an STR as a
It did affect
resident
them.
would already be in the process, I
Oh,
would
right.
think.
Yeah.
And that, the moratorium, I don't think, I probably wouldn't apply to someone who's already applied. I mean,
Well,
Does that answer your
Yeah.
question?
Maybe we should give them like a month grace period or something, like to, if they
You know-
are just hearing this happening now.
The only thing I'll just bring to that just is also that at some point, somebody might not be happy that they can't have an STR, right? And I think the point of all of this is we created a law and we were very, strategic and possibly like gentle with how that law was introduced and came about, right?
Which is
We didn't,
true.
no one's license got taken away in that
No.
process.
Right.
And I think with a moratorium, we're kind of operating with that same spirit of like, we're not going away taking
It's not about being
licenses.
Yeah.
punitive.
But at a certain
Yeah.
point, if we don't put that type of guardrail on, it's like, so I'm not disagreeing that like there could be a mechanism that's not like, okay, as of Monday, if it's, but I think whether it's next month or the month after, the idea right now is just like, there are things for sale and we're mindful of the urgency and also of the number just not moving.
And there are a lot of people now who are unloading their houses because, again, they bought them at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Now the short-term rental market is tanking. I mean, everybody who owns a short-term rental is seeing what, probably 20 to 30% drop in business last year or the year before.
I'd say that right.
That's
right.
what I've seen
And
up
it's
in
becoming,
Fleischmann's.
it
I
seems to
think
be
some-
becoming a race to the bottom.
Yeah, so anybody new who's thinking
Fuel-
about having a short-term rental
Yeah.
in this area should be just told it's not,
Airbnb's not suffering.
Oh, yes,
it's
they
not
are.
profitable.
They are suffering.
You think they are?
Who is,
Look at the numbers.
Airbnb,
The company
the
itself?
company, yeah.
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 They're
Anyway,
also-
I'm not
they're-
really worried.
I know, I'm like, I think they'll be okay, but
Sorry
even
to
if they're
bring that
not, there's like a few other websites that'll step
Well,
up
and
in their
becomes-
place.
That becomes
Yeah.
another issue also, because we have, you have a few major platforms, you have Vrbo and Airbnb. Okay, you know what's gonna be next, right? Facebook Marketplace, which is already there, putting units on there. How are you going to check that one?
People are already doing it, believe me.
I know.
And I don't know, sometimes it's like, are they doing it to get around because they don't have a license,
Yes.
But
They flat out are.
it's sort of,
but
that's
wouldn't
pretty
that be-
desperate.
Wouldn't that be covered with the STR law already?
Yeah.
Only if you get
Because
caught.
it's not specifying Airbnb, VRBO.
Oh, it's
It's
on
not
any
spec-
platform, it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah,
but
It's a
matter.
platform,
but
the
compliance
thing is,
might not be able to-
You can't check the Facebook platform that easily.
You can check, look, this is what I'm saying the county provides, is the technical assistance and the platforms that scan every which way, top, bottom, and sideways of where
They've got
there's.
drones like flying.
I'm
over
sure
like
they
that.
But so it's not impossible.
Seeing how many
We,
of
we're
those
not,
in there.
we're not using all of that technology yet, but it's
At what
relatively
cost?
new.
At what cost?
At a subsidized cost from the county and then paid for by license fees.
So
I would-
can we put that in?
I don't know, I don't have the
I would
accounting
like to
worked
see
out
us put that in our recommendations to the town board.
of using the tech, yeah.
Because that's the
Well,
only way we can
I
check
think Peter did
compliance.
propose that initially.
They've
And
had
it's-
that platform for years now.
But
the
if we
county.
can get it
It's-
subsidized by the county, that's a big selling point.
Well, they help you get a discount for it. I think they help teach you how to use it, and it's like meant to help with enforcement. That's the whole
Yeah.
point, the whole point of it. But
Do they really want the enforcement at the bottom
Well,
of it, since they're getting 4% now, right?
There's
but
a-
that's how that's how like one time I had an Airbnb in a bedroom of my house,
Cool.
and
Yeah.
before the STR law happened, I have since not rented
Yeah.
it out on a short-term basis, but. I got a letter from the county, and my
Oh.
thing wasn't even online anymore, but it was like,
Oh, so you know it's good.
I know it worked because I didn't even really have an active thing, but like there was a whisper of it still up
Yeah.
there,
Right.
and so it automatically sends that letter.
Wow.
A human being, I mean, somebody has to mail it still, but like it
Yeah.
generates that stuff for you, and
Yeah.
so it's just a matter of us coordinating more, I think, with the town employees who are working on this. I trust that it is not, as straightforward as it might seem from sitting here, but it's like acknowledging that they might need help in order to be effective at being able to review everything.
Because I know that there's some of the real estate agents are keeping an eye out for listings or looking at Airbnb at the listings, and they're seeing things that seem to be falling through the cracks already.
Well, there's properties, including the one on 214, unfortunately, that was on Airbnb and bookable before it had the license, before it had a C of O.
Oh, really?
Before it had a certificate of
They
occupancy.
went up there before then?
But it wasn't bookable within the period, on that day and time, but it
It
was
wasn't-
bookable in the future.
Oh, when I looked a few days ago, it wasn't bookable.
That happened thereafter. Somebody
Oh.
maybe,
Saw a Facebook post or something.
But so-
It's not bookable, or
it's no longer
full?
bookable, but
It's
it's,
no longer bookable.
but it's
you can
on the
You can
website.
see it up there.
but that's some towns don't even let that happen.
They might have blocked off their calendar for the next 8 months, and then it's bookable after that or
Right.
something.
But I think that's another aspect of like, where does the listing become the license, and when is the license effective?
Oh,
and
I
if-
see. Because you can put a listing up before you get the license, but you're not offering it, so it's like.
Right, that's like
There's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, I guess it's fine, but it's like, does that then, can someone just direct message that person and not book it through the website?
I
Yes.
don't think
You-
Airbnb allows that.
You can
They
can
don't.
talk to them.
They don't.
You can
I'm
talk to
saying,
them.
you could
Request
communicate
it
with the
through
host,
through
hey, I
Airbnb.
noticed it's not bookable, what's up? Oh, well,
You can,
I don't know that that's happening, I'm just saying, like, it's, the listing is up and therefore people can view it.
Oh, you could do that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So-
But supposedly Airbnb is very against
Of course, well, because there's
I
no-
don't know how well they enforce it.
Well,
Yeah.
first of all, they
They
don't
don't
get to
enforce it.
collect fees if you don't, people do this all the time where, oh, book with me once and then next time just DM me and we can skip
Yeah.
all the fees,
Oh no,
right?
I've seen a couple of listings in Shandaken.
Well,
doing
and
that
they
sort of
say
deal.
don't do that
Yeah.
because they want the fees also, but it's also a protection, insurance, like there's risk by renting to somebody
Yeah.
when you didn't go through the website, but there's also this aspect of
There's very little
if
risk.
you've already met them, if you've already felt comfortable with them in the
Airbnb
house,
offer a
then-
wonderful insurance, but most of us doubt that'll actually work. So we all have insurance to cover short-term rentals, so
Right.
it would be irrelevant if it was through.
So that
Airbnb.
speaks to when can the listing go live, regardless of bookability. Okay, in light of the fact that there is potentially a workshop on Monday, I really want to pause
We've
here
just gone down
because
the rabbit hole. haven't
there's,
We should wrap
there's,
this up, huh?
yeah, we can't go on all night, and we want to just cover a couple of more things. So, who can come to the meeting on Monday? Is anyone available? Okay, so that's fine. That's great. We will report back. We'll share stuff over email. We're gonna take some of these notes. Maybe we can share them over this week so that we can add more thoughts and questions. Okay, so we're gonna move on from the SDR, which doesn't mean you have to go anywhere.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I think that for a moratorium, I think what the town board is thinking is when you put in a moratorium, you kind of have to give an idea of a time frame that the
Exactly.
moratorium is going to extend. So that's probably what they need from you.
That's
Oh,
what
I
we're
see.
planning
How
on
long do you
providing.
need? Yeah,
That's
put
what
on a
we're
moratorium
planning on
plan.
providing.
Okay.
That's the only thing, before knowing about this workshop, that was
Uh-huh.
what I thought they were waiting for.
Right.
There's a model too. Woodstock did a moratorium. I don't remember the exact details.
Maybe it's
but-
not a timeline, maybe it's a
Yeah.
number.
Yeah,
Maybe we
Woodstock
want to
does
get
have a
down
moratorium. I
to,
think Olive does as well.
Is it still?
I know Woodstock's is still in effect, or was still in effect
Oh, wow.
last year.
Yeah, it'd just be interesting as a
And
term
there
of
was a
reference to
waiting
see
list.
how
Yeah.
they did it.
I think if my memory stands correct, it was about 43 units on a waiting
Can we
list.
talk
Wow.
about this another time?
Okay, which the town clerk there, she estimated it would be between 3 and 5 years.
Okay, we have to move
That'll do
on.
it.
I'm sorry, we gotta move on. Okay, are we all ready? We're gonna move on. Come to the workshop on Monday, we'll move on. Okay, so the next thing is the next zoning board of appeals hearing for the property on 28, the Rudensky property that we have discussed previously. That was initially scheduled for January, it got rescheduled to next month. We really need to go there. I think and please watch the last 1 or 2 zoning board meetings on YouTube, because they really need our input
Is this the guy, is this the couple
gentleman that was
came?
here.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Okay, gotcha.
There's a lot of, I sent a whole long email to all of us about this, but the gist of it is there's either a use or area variance that this property owner needs in order to build anything. And then there's 2 to 3 other variances that might be needed to build the thing that he wants to build, which is a single level, 7-unit, 1-bedroom apartments. So we need to give our input, we need to go to that hearing, we need to participate in that conversation, because I think there's a lot of like, well, we need housing, and it's like, yeah, totally, we all agree on that. The types of housing, the locations of housing, the density, these are all aspects of what, as a community, we're also going to be envisioning and working on over the next few years. And I think it's important that we give a voice to the idea that, yes, housing is needed, but just because someone wants to build the maximum amount they could fit on a lot we don't necessarily have to, give our rubber stamp of approval. We need to be open-minded in the needs of the developer, and we want to see people come here. We want to see them build great, options for housing. It won't all be exclusively affordable at these 30%, 80% AMI rates, but, increasing housing at all levels of income are important. And we also need affordable housing. And we don't necessarily have regulations in place to be like, oh, well, if you want to build 6 units, then 2 of them need to be at such and such rate.
And you can put a restriction on it.
We could attempt to do that, but we haven't gone down that road yet. I think the question is right now for this parcel, is sharing the housing committee's opinion from the lens of the types of housing that we know that we need, but also honoring the exercise that we're embarking on as a town to examine the zoning, examine the density, and determine, where it's appropriate to increase the density in that way, because that is a big jump from 0 structures to a 7-unit apartment building. So I don't know if we want to have a discussion about that
And
right
do you know
now.
for a fact that they're not doing STRs, or can we
Well,
prevent that?
as the current law, no.
Well, actually, if we're not issuing licenses.
But
then
yes, right. But as it, with nothing changing, and if it was today, and, that would be an option. The other aspect is this developer has apartments in Mount Tremper. They're rented right now for between $1,600 and $2,000, I believe. I know a couple that lived in one of them. That seems to be like the affordability, finagle is 2 people in a 1-bedroom, because then it's far less expensive per person. But I have to say out loud, I don't appreciate that on this listing, and this speaks to we can't force him to rent to certain people, but it very clearly says no Section 8. And I know one of the tenants there who tried. I'm not sure, but one of the tenants was she had a lease, and she was trying to find someone to take over the lease because she was moving. And she had multiple people come to her saying, this is great, I can actually afford this, this would work. And then they get to that line, and because that is how they would be paying for their housing, it's no longer an option. And I really don't like that. I think that is setting a terrible tone. That's their
Probably
position.
racist, and
It's very
really-
classist and
probably
racist.
illegal.
And I think it's really important to say those things out loud and acknowledge that, yes, they're in the business of renting and being a landlord, but we're in the business of trying to create conditions and outcomes that are in favor of affordable housing and a healthy housing mix. So I'm of the standpoint that I think these folks should build a smaller building with fewer units that still would hopefully be able to maximize his income potential without really changing everything about that parcel and everything about that area. Let's discuss.
I like the idea of making a percentage of the building affordable, requiring it.
I don't know how we go about that just yet, but
But it could be proposed at the meeting on the 21st.
but he stood right here and told us he's not building like, that's not his goals, that's not his interest, that's not his,
Well, there's gonna need to be some compromising here,
Sure.
because we have goals too.
right?
Well, he's fulfilling a need, okay? He's fulfilled a need in Mount Tremper with those, it's a mixed-use dwelling, okay? Because you've got 3 commercial units there, and I think he said he's got 6 units above, or above and behind, whatever.
Oh, that's
it
the one
is.
over from the Emerson?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, across from Emerson.
Yeah,
There's like a
And-
Coldwell Banker.
yeah.
And he specifically stated, he goes, I have somebody from Bread Alone that's living there, I have 2 people that work at the Emerson that are living there, and I think somebody who works at Tremper Hill Farms was the other person.
So they must be somehow affordable, not, they can't be massively
Charges
expensive, right?
$2,000 a month. Okay,
For 1 bedroom.
for a 1 bedroom. And I
That's-
think there's 6 1-bedrooms.
It's like Woodstock rents.
Well, and, sorry, go on.
And, he's fulfilling a need. He's got 6 units there, people are living there, they're working in the community or close to the community.
It's a totally different zoning, it's a totally different
is.
area. It's across from the Emerson, first of all,
It's a lot closer to Kingston. Okay, there's a huge difference between living here and living down in Mount Tremper getting to Kingston, right? You are that much closer to everything. On a good day, it's 15 minutes. It could be 20 on a bad day.
but let's talk about this parcel, because obviously that one's an example of what he has done. But yes, I don't think anyone doesn't want more housing, right? We all agree we need more housing. That's not the question anymore. The question is, this parcel, is it actually appropriate? And from the housing perspective, do we think that 7 1-bedroom units is what the zoning board should say, yeah, okay, go ahead? It's only one type of home, and it's only really for one type of person.
But again, here, who is to dictate what a person is to do with their property? If I can meet,
Philip, it's because it's against the law right now, what he wants to build,
commercial.
right? So
It's
it,
commercial, we can totally.
and it's a change of use if
it's a use change.
that's recommended by the county.
But if he can sit there and meet the needs of the Department of Health for your septic system, if you can meet DOT standards, because you have to,
Which
put
is still unclear if that's
curb cut
possible.
in there.
It's still
okay?
unclear if that's even doable.
I don't know what you're doing for your water needs, okay, because you do need potable water. If you can meet these things, how many restrictions do we put on this person?
No, the
The restrictions
are already there.
exist.
Right.
He wants a variance.
He wants all the restrictions lifted so he can build something that currently is not legal in the code. So, it's not okay to stand there and threaten that, like, it's me or nobody. It's like, we're about to embark on a whole process, and we've already spent so much time on this one parcel. The whole idea is, okay, we need to, the zoning board is ready to be done with it. And it's already bounced around town. So it's not that we were trying to layer him with restrictions. He has restrictions
Yes.
that they determined in the last meeting he sort of created for himself because he subdivided that property,
Correct.
right? It was part of an existing structure. He could have added on to it, whatever. That's not what they did.
Right.
They were trying to maximize it maybe so that they can sell it later, whatever. The idea is, what do we recommend? Do we say, yeah, let him do whatever he wants, which could set some sort of precedent that is going to bite everyone in the butt later? Do we say, here's the happy medium? It's far less restrictions if you do a 2-unit or a 4-unit. And it actually works with the parcel setbacks and all of the different variables that that particular parcel has that he's contending with, which parking being one of them. If 2 people, let's say, live in each unit, you need 14 parking spaces. So having passed by that every
You can't
single
have any guests
day.
either.
What?
And you can't have any guests either.
Right. So I just think it's like, yes, we want the housing, but we want an appropriate amount of housing. We want an appropriate mix. We want the people living there to be safe. We want the neighbors to be happy that there is something there and not bemoaning they put the biggest thing they can squeeze on the tiniest lot. Like, that's how we get NIMBYism. That's how we get to a point where people don't want to see any building or development. So I think that's part of what we're meant to help advise on is, the zoning board is like, okay, well, we have a housing committee. They need to come and vocalize what they think, should happen. It's not like just whatever we say they're going to do, but it's a matter of sharing this intel and understanding of where we're coming from and making, contributing recommendations.
I gotta say, I know this is not possible, but personally, I feel like we shouldn't have any zoning variances until we overhaul the zoning laws. However, I know that's not gonna happen, certainly not in the next 12 months. But I also think that it's one thing to give someone a variance for something that's sane, or the local guy down here who owns right at the intersection down here, who owns the hotel, who wants to extend one of his buildings and the thing's gonna be bigger than it's supposed to or whatever, but he's been there forever.
But that's
Upgrade-
legal.
No, but he had to come before the planning board and get a budget. But I'm just saying, we certainly don't need to be offering variances for people who aren't gonna live there, who are coming in from out of town, and who wanna do things we don't think we need. Why would we give someone like that a variance?
Well, and I think the argument of helping people maximize the income is slightly problematic for me, because I'm a hesitant capitalist, right? I live in a capitalist society, but I want other things to help guide decisions and not just money. And I think that's part of what I hope we can infuse all of these conversations with too, is that's not the only important thing. And if he wants to build something, there are all of these regulations that they're still willing to grant variances. They're still willing to let him build something. Right now, he can't build anything according to the law. So it's already, things are being less restrictive on him. He's asking for every restriction to be lifted.
Well, then why don't you consider putting X number of units allocated for affordable housing?
And if he
Okay?
doesn't wanna do that, he can have less units.
Or you get 4
I like
units,
that.
or you get 2 units.
I like that.
Okay, that would be a logical way to handle it. And do you have that written into any variances and any deeds moving forward? Okay, he already has a subdivision on the property. Okay, you get half the loaf, you don't get the entire loaf.
Right. I mean, I do recognize also that any housing that's built for rent, not sale, we need. There's almost nothing for rent in this area. So even if it's not quote-unquote low income or affordable housing, however we define that, it's still needed. And I think rentals are not going to be attracting the kind of people that are, scaring us in terms of overdevelopment. They're not gonna be,
Yeah.
it's usually people who are coming up here to work, probably some semi-transient, maybe they're gonna be here for a couple of years, maybe not.
Well, and I'm looking for the term that Kai shared with me, and he prefaced it that it's sort of controversial, but it's kind of this idea of trickle-down housing almost, and maybe you know the term, and I'm totally blanking. I thought I had it in my notes. But basically, it's this idea that even if housing is created for not the lowest income or not middle income even, but higher income bracket, that sort of alleviates this burden from what is potentially affordable for people at a lower income bracket, because now those people are getting the more expensive stuff. He said it's controversial because I don't know that it's necessarily like proven to be an effective means. It's like, it does sound like trickle down economics. We're like, oh, it'll take care of this and it'll all work itself out. But, you know, I think there has to be some like regulation, which there is, on how this comes about. And I think what our hope is in the long term is that we participate in a process that looks at the entire town, that looks at all of the different areas where we can increase housing, and then we can then be at a point to update laws and then seek out developers for very specific things and very specific criteria. And that sort of could be the process.
Recommending that one or two of those units be affordable is a really good test of how things would work if we do like affordable housing overlays and adjust our zoning, and it would really start the conversation.
That's great, you're right. I like that.
So do you think that needs to be even if it's a 4-unit, or do you think 7 with some kind of stipulation?
I'd like to know the magnitude of the variances he's asking for. I mean, if it's like right against the road and he's taking the whole lot, and, you know, it's like, how much is he really asking for?
Would it be possible to visit the site and just see where it is? I mean, I'm on the planning board, and I have to say, I never did that myself, even though he came in front of us, and it would have really helped. It just looked to me from the map that it wasn't an issue. But you're saying there may be issues on the site itself.
Well, there's like a power line or some kind of line in the back. It butts up against a hill, a very steep hill. So it's like, it has a very clear back, and then the front is 28. And the question is, could it comply with DOT? I'm not sure, but like, I've heard.
I don't remember that being an issue.
There is a requirement, when you're on a state road, okay, you need to, for the curb cut and the accessibility, you need to get permission from the state. It may require, and I think he already has a culvert in place there.
Yeah, there has been things done to prepare for it. But
So that's kind of out of the zoning board's hands, though, right? That's the DOT, and they can require that he get that before they approve it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there was a letter sent from Ulster County Planning Board to the zoning board with recommendations saying it's not, because initially he came to them for the area variance, and they say, we think this is actually a use variance. And that letter also then comes with like other recommendations and, you know, context of their thoughts on that. So, online, he has the plans, but I would definitely recommend, I just happen to pass it every single day in the light of day. And, you know, it's not a big parcel. It would be a significant increase from nothing to 7 units. And I don't know how it would compare in person for you. And you're so much more of an expert at looking at these things than I am, but like, I think looking at it in real life, there's several large mature trees that would have to come down. It's right up against that hillside. I think there's a little creek in the back that comes through.
That is correct.
Why does he want to do single level?
That was the design that
I
he.
think it's to also avoid
the
some
elevator.
sprinkler requirements or some other.
Right, okay.
Personally, I was feeling that the single level would be less visually impactful than like something that looked like an apartment building. That's just my own personal feeling.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a motel, right? It's kind of like
Right.
that same type.
Right.
But I don't know. I think to have 7 and then to have all the parking that you need for that, which according to the zoning board, it seems like it needs to be in the front of the building, which they seem to
Because
not
that's
like
the
that
only-
either.
The only appropriate place for it, according
I
to the
guess,
site.
I guess so. But, yeah, I mean, I think it's like, considering all of the variances, to me, this isn't the right time for pushing something through and potentially like harming future projects and future initiatives that the town is trying to work on to do this exact thing, but do it with more consensus and more agreement of what we need and where. And this is a little cart before the horse.
Although if you can get the precedent of affordable housing requirement, that is a good precedent.
I like that.
That precedent is great.
That might
That's
be
a
worth
great-
doing it.
That's a great, it should be a talking point, if
It,
nothing
yeah.
else.
Yeah, I would have to look into like how that gets
The
implemented.
mechanism.
Yeah, I don't really
they've been doing it
know.
with big
Well, they
projects
may
in
know.
Kingston, like the Kingstonian,
Right.
there's a lot of talk about that, but
Yeah,
I'm not sure what the mechanisms are and
Right.
legalities
yeah.
of asking for that.
Hmm.
I don't know.
And then if it gets sold a few years later,
Oh, yeah.
there's currently no mechanism
Has to
for
go through, yeah.
that to be an SDR in the
Oh.
current, in the,
Right.
in the current mix of things.
Well, by then, we'll have the cap down to 10.
Okay. Oh, my
kidding.
goodness. Yeah. Okay, well, the last thing that we didn't get to, but I do have updates on comprehensive plan stuff because the town is pursuing with Patterns for Progress, which is a planning agency in Hudson Valley, to apply for a smart growth grant, which is a DEC grant to help the town embark on the comp plan and complete it and do it with like a lot of great, substance. And so we would participate in that from the housing standpoint. They really have like a mindset for housing. They recognize that we all agree that it's like of enormous importance in that plan. So it would have a lot of like housing juiciness to it. And we would contribute to that process. But it's due at the end of the month and then it's not awarded until April. So in that in-between time, we still need to look at the section that I sent around and add our recommended edits. I think ideally, we would give that to the comp plan committee. If it can't be next month, then the following. But considering this new development with the grant, it's like, it could alleviate a little pressure, or we can say, we really want to like work on this, get it into their next meeting, which is the second Mondays,
The comp plan.
comp plan meeting, right? Second Mondays. But we have 5 weeks this month in January, so we have an extra month. So we have 3 weeks until that meeting. And it's a short section. I really think we can just do like track changes and do it on the Google Doc. And then give them that entire thing with our comments, because that's kind of how they're going through the process right now, which is this first step of the process regardless, with whether you're with a consultant or not. But it's like gonna set us all up for success if we've already done that before we start working with the consultant.
So let's do that. Let's just
Yeah.
hash it out over email.
Google
in the
Doc.
Next 2 weeks.
Okay,
We have 2 weeks to do that?
I think technically 3.
Okay.
Yeah. Because next Monday is still
So
January.
you're talking about having it by the next comp plan meeting?
Yes, delivering the comp plan committee a Google Doc with our track changes and revisions.
So
By the
then you
next
could
one.
get that to Mary, and Mary could put it on our Google Doc.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
Cool.
okay.
Yeah, because that meeting is February 12th. Okay, so we will work on that. Everyone has access to the Google Doc folder, so we'll create it in there. Beautiful. And then we'll email it
And
to
the
them.
notes we took on the STRs for tonight is also in that folder now.
Okay, great. Okay, I think we got to everything on this kooky agenda. So, thank you both for coming.
Oh, thanks
And-
for
Yeah,
having
thank
us.
For
you.
having us, yes.
Isn't that delightful?
You're welcome
It's nice
back
to have It's
anytime.
nice to have a lively conversation.
Definitely. Okay, well, and now we're sworn in, so we could like talk about what that means and vote on things. But would anyone like to make a motion to end the meeting? Or,
I motion, let's go home.
Vicky motions. Does anyone second? Second. I can second. And Phil second. Woo-hoo. And it's nice and late, 9:06.
I want to stay.
You want to stay? Yeah, let's.
Does it make?
Do it again.
The variance, the zoning variance, is that at a hearing stage? Or is? Is it-
Yes.
So they're actually scheduling a hearing, or
The
is
hearing
the
is-
hearing's gonna be at the next meeting?
next meeting at
Okay. Okay,
6:30, or, yeah, I think it's 6 or 6:30.
okay.
And I believe it's February 20th. The
That's
zoning board is
what?
Third Wednesday, yeah.
That's the parcel.
Ah, let's see.
It's
It's so narrow.
Well, we were in the back of this property here,
Piece of land on 21.
okay?
I
That used to be
don't
old
know
Route
exactly
28.
where it is, maybe
Okay.
Sophie could tell us.
This is Route
Where's that
28.
piece of land where he wants to
Where's
build
the
7
north-
What-
apartments?
How can we find it? along
That's right up here.
28? Is it near here?
Yeah, it's right here. Viv, if you come over here, I can show it to you.
Oh, okay.
So is it east?
I have it on
Are
the
they,
park.
is he east of that hotel or west?
He's
of
just
it?
east of it.
Okay, gotcha.
It's just east of it, okay? This is the house. Okay. This is the Nor's, the
On
the motel.
That looks
This-
like, yeah,
This is
that's-
Norrisdale
that's a-
Motel right here.
That's
Okay,
an
then we have an
STR, isn't it?
older building here.
Right.
Okay, there's a Cape Cod Colonial,
Okay,
kind of like a salt box style.
yeah.
Okay, this is where the proposal is.
You're going-
For,
you're
I'm
going
heading
west.
east, I'm heading east,
Oh, back towards,
towards
So
Phoenicia.
this is his property, but
This-
that's the part that's
Right.
buildable?
This is theoretically not developable because of the
before
grade.
the Norrisdale.
Correct.
Before, yeah.
East of it,
Okay,
yeah.
so this is where he wants to put the 7 units, right? in
Right.
this. Okay, this is a 2021 map from Ulster County Parcel Viewer.
So like where those big trees are on the right?
Right here, right where